Hello and welcome to day 84, 365 days towards racial change. My name is Thomas Nyback. Let's get right into our standard introduction. We're here discussing black issues, problems in America, and those subtleties behind the scenes, uh, organizations, institutions, mindsets that keep blacks in general uh, in a vulnerable state in a country, a nation with so much overwhelming wealth and resources. Now, although as I've done this project, continued day 84 here, I found that the wealth and resources is derived from some creative methods uh, occurring at extremely high levels, institutional levels in America. We still have to live day to day under those umbrellas that are very powerful, very well entrenched, not going away anytime soon. But there's still things we can do as black people to rise up, participate equally, and get the respect we deserve. Um, just like Asians, Arabs, Hispanics, any other non-white group that is doing well, it's only the blacks, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, not just blacks. And where it's not a phenomenon, say Haiti, you find that country or those groups of people sequestered, dysfunctional, having issues, enormous problems, and whatnot. You know, as far as African nations, maybe Nigeria can be counted as a successful space for black folks. But I'm guessing there's a whole lot of white European influence there guiding and um, working in the scenes, having an influence there. But we don't care about Nigeria right now. We're caring about black folks. We're caring about descendants of slaves here in America. Why the majority of the minority is dysfunctional, poor, uh, unable to excel, progress, and rise up in supposedly the wealthiest and most powerful nation on earth. So, as this project has continued, I've stumbled onto two main concerns of mine. The first concern has two parts. Is this black descendants of slavery mindset being passed down from generation to generation? Is the apathy, lethargy, um, compliance with white power and privilege something intuitive? We just keep passing it on to generation. The second part, the second vein of that concern is the white mind of privilege, expectation of favor, power, white power being passed down, from generation to generation. I have my biases towards both answers, but I want people to think of on their own conclusions. I think I present evidence here to objective historical evidence to help us come to a reasonable conclusion about that. Second concern is knowing how to move properly economically in America, which blacks do not. Blacks have such a, it's one thing like in slavery times to be intentionally have a program of illiteracy directed at us. But now there's other kinds of illiteracy. We don't have a financial literacy. We are financially illiterate, Oh, we put our little money here and stuff, but we don't We don't fully understand um, products, devices that can beat inflation. Do we know what inflation is, how it works, why it is a facet of our financial life, and things like that? Well, it's a vast subject, but I don't find black people starting anywhere in that um, understanding, in that discourse. Um, I'm only at the very humble beginnings of learning what America does, how America's working with money, federal banking, Federal Reserve, international banking, uh, international reserves, how and why a handful of excuse me, white bankers and banks can upset the entire economy of the world. Now, these are important things to know and understand and make a part of our conversations. But black people are just, we're spread so thin in a lot of ways, numerically, mentally, socially, vocationally, financially. And we need to focus. I think black folks think what we are um, like we really have American life down. Uh, but as we're going to talk about today, there are international influences, things from our past that we need to gather, we need to harness and understand to get a proper perspective on elevating ourselves as a group in America. I'm influenced by a man that talks about these issues much better than I. He's written a bunch of books. I've read 3 of them. His name is Dr. Claude Anderson. I want you to get these books. Please read these books. My commentary is adequate at best. We can do much better, but you go to the source. His name's Dr. Claude Anderson, Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. We are in this text today. If you have the book, page 109. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold here. Be advised, these texts are more than a decade old, yet the message is timeless, right? It's like the Bible, right? If you have a relationship with Jesus or any Protestant type leanings, that's the most I'm most well versed on. The institution in which I was brought up, you know, we don't toss the Bible aside because a bunch of old guys lived a long time ago. There's a timelessness of the message. I think Dr. Anderson's work is just as timeless. And finally, I read his book, Powernomics, A National Plan to Empower Black America. Very important text. So we come out of there heavily. My work is easy. These are short clips, daily clips, and I got the narrative right in front of me, so I don't have to do a whole lot of research around these issues. Just so we're not bogged down in the reality of the continuation and the continued propagation of slavery in America. We're not as far from slavery as we think we are. I don't care what the legislation says. Yes, we had a good showing in the 60s, but if you notice American history, groups come and go. We had the 60s, the 80s, we had the AIDS epidemic. It's all these parabolas in America that happen. Yeah, it's a good thing, I guess, and all that. So, but I digress. Maybe I'll do a clip on that. The America's parabolas. Uh, but what I guess my point is that, with this the '60s parabola, you know, the height, culminating in Dr. King's assassination, and then it kind of trails off. But, I think too many blacks think we have arrived and that we are participating. Our ceiling isn't glass; it's made of reinforced steel, concrete, and we're clawing at it with flesh and bone. We don't even have the tools yet to really break through. Uh, so that's some of my burdens. Anyway, just so we're not always bogged down in the reality of that, this is my mindset. We'll take a fictional look at the reality of slave life in America. Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, Uncle Tom's Cabin. We check in with Uncle Tom occasionally and see how he's getting along. Him and a bunch of other slave characters that she brings out. So I'm working through the book, and it's about time we probably check in on Old Tom, although the story left off with an escaped slave, female named Eliza. She's taken her son Harry and fled. So the last we saw of her and Harry was moving off into the woods in Ohio, a free territory back in the mid 1800s, and we're going to see how she's getting along on her escape, because the slave trade was such an industry that trackers continued to hunt even in free states. No asylum, so to speak. Behind me, you see hashtag us too. You find black women getting together, get discoursing there. Also, check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a black Facebook. If you're business minded, I'm trying to get more entrepreneurial myself. You check out the blackbusinessschool.com. You'll find Dr. Boyce Watkins there and a great staff. And check out his products. Just my personal disclaimer: great school, great ideas. I'm not much for subscriptions and entanglements. I want to purchase my product and take it home. It's the same way I used to use drugs. I don't want to go spend my money and be with a group, so to speak. I'm more introverted. I like to get my product and come on home. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Said we're coming out of Black Labor, White Wealth. I love the timelines that Dr. Anderson has. He has a bunch, and it gives me a lot of material to talk about. And I don't know what anybody's getting out of this. I've got a subscriber that I talk to every day. She happens to be very close to my heart. And I see the ticker go up every once in a while. I love seeing new subscribers. But this is my personal project for my own mind, because I came to a point, as it actually happened years ago, that I realized I was running into walls, ceilings, impediments to me progressing. And I saw younger people, mostly white, male, female, going into places that I could only dream about. What is the attitude and mindset driving that, helps them stick to their guns? What kind of conditioning is there? So, I had that on my mind, and fortunately I ran into Dr. Anderson's work. Having said that, that's kind of the foundation to my gravitation, the way I like timelines, because it gives me an idea what happened. Like, this is the 21st century. Well, what he means, like something happened 400 or 500 years ago that still it's progressing and it's having an influence. Today, like, you know, aside from Jesus, right? Who can, or a legitimate prophet, who can sit there and say, you know, oh, I'm gonna buy this thing. I'm gonna interact with this institution. I'm going to I'm gonna go to this city. You know, like, who sits back and says, you know, what I'm doing at this moment is going to propel itself and have an enormous impact 3, 4, 500 years from now. I mean, who intentionally does that? I don't know. You know, you got to be a pretty special person, Nostradamus or something like that. But that is what happened in my mind. You know, so the timelines that Dr. Anderson puts, oh, the laws enacted in the colonies in the mid 1700s. We're looking at 1400s to 1600s today. How the germs of the slave institutions uh, erupted and has its impact here in the year 2019. Amazing, amazing. You know, uh, I even had a kind of a reaction today because some of the groups we're going to talk about. You know, when I'm moving about in the world and not understanding the fear, trepidation that some people have towards me. When I'm just trying to get a coffee, I'm just going to 7-Eleven to get a cup of coffee. Yet there's walls and there's looks, and people are grabbing their children and stuff and raising alarms. I'm like, what is this all about? Well, it's rooted in the past and a lot of these attitudes from groups. Today, I'm reassessing my relation with a particular group. I won't say too much because that might lean towards hate, and I don't want this. This is not a form of hate. We want to understand the past, get some historical roots so that we can start making better informed decisions on how we interact with the world and how we collectively as a group move up, because we're not going to do it alone. I'm not going to do it alone. I need help to get there. So day 84, we've chewed up a lot of time here so far. So if you have a book, Black Labor White Wealth, page 109 has a timeline. It's about a 200-year timeline, 1400 to 1600s. And just reiterate Dr. Anderson's call for us to take a look at certain successful groups in America and adopt some of their processes, especially those. The main one is being exclusive, being loyal, having a national allegiance to the group. You know, forget all the religious fluff and traditions. Will you please throw that stuff away? That is, we don't use those in their proper context. That we use those more as leverage to coerce more than rallying points to come together, in my mind. So the brief notes has a lot about the roots and a quick story about when I used to be a landscaper. I used to weed. I hate weeding, but I made my process easier by looking at it. I come across a weed, but it'd be a small weed. I got pretty big hands, so my tendency with a small weed, I would just tear off the leaves and this weed would just kind of laugh at me and be like, whatever, and it kept growing and it stayed, and you know. So my process was wait till I get a good handhold on the weed. If it wasn't, obstructing the beautification of the space in which I was working, then I would let it grow. Let it grow another week or two. Hopefully, get some good rain to soften up the soil. Let it grow so I can get a good hand grip on it. And then I could pull it out, roots and all, and I'd never see that weed again. That is part of the angle with um, understanding how important the roots are for us. To take Alex Haley's project even further and use it as a foundation, as a stepping point to help us elevate together. So, 1400s, displacement of Africa's natural and human wealth began, with ships and shore expeditions into this dark continent. That was um, the 1400s was the Americas. What was of Africa was what America was going to be to Europe. Europe was just reaching out. Mankind was just reaching out, still exploring the world, understanding that it's round. I'm talking way back, right? Um, Christopher Columbus is about to head west and all this stuff. But the some of this manufacturing, so this resources, labor was found in these dark people there in Africa. 1500s, tribal chiefs, Arabs, and Moors began their modern black slavery. Moors were a people group, an Islamic group, Muslim group, kind of in the southern Spain, and uh, religion is all over the place in slavery. Catholics, Protestants, uh, Muslims, Jews, they all participated in some way in this slave trade. It was the exploitation mind of the Europeans and those maybe in the Mediterranean sea borders, meeting more of a docile people with a different value system in the Africans and the Native Americans that they were going to stumble onto on the West to take their land. You know, uh, so I bring up religion is important because you find these uh, people in America, especially I want to say the Nation of Islam. Yes, I want to call them out specifically and be like, that they want to use our color as a common ground, a rallying point under this banner of Islam. But Islam needs to be exposed for the slave mongering that it participated in, along with Christians, Jews, Catholics, Arabs, all these people. So a big problem with this project and blacks in America is getting us understanding slavery, understanding our position, today's present position in slavery, before we can be emancipated. We walking around thinking we're so free and participating when we're really enslaved. It's not until we grasp and get better with understanding uh, our true position internationally that we can then rise up. Where those are our sports heroes, game show hosts, talk show hosts, those occasional Success stories are an extreme minority. You can bubble up that way and be in denial of who you really are in the world, you know. But I like to get the crap out of the way first so I can move on unhindered, you know. So this thing about Islam it really stuck out to me in today's study because of that point. You know, it's black folks are not inherently Islamic through our ancestors or anything like that. Islam, you look at the religion of a people, and it's the religion of the group that conquered them. It's not anything naturally derived. You know, whoever's been strongest is going to enforce that belief in that space. 1511, Catholic Church condemned the use of Indian slaves and suggested black slaves. Instead, you know, they noticed the physical resiliency combined with an apparent docility, and they exploited and took advantage of that. This in connection with billions of dollars in gold and silver transported back to Europe from the slave mines, and you think, and diamonds as well, and you think like billions 400 or 500 years ago. That's that's an enormous amount of wealth to attach billions to what you're holding on to. 1550s, Europe is kind of coming out of its dark ages. Famine, crime, disease, poverty, and all this stuff. They're just looking for any relief, you know. They had, I guess, the economic commerce coming out of Africa. Oh, but they still needed some stimulus. And Columbus is going to come back and get all this going with the whole Western Hemisphere, North America, Central America, South America. 1591 began invasions of Arabs into Timbuktu in West Africa, incursions, wars, conquering the people and whatnot, and enslaving them. You know, and as I move about in America, I had no idea. See, this is something, this is a mindset, this is a prevailing idea in the culture. You know, we got these groups out here, they talk around the dinner table. They come from cultures that have enslaved black folks. You know, black folks have no solid history of enslaving another people, stuff like that. Um, but the Arabs, you know, other groups have a lot of pride um, and fighting for their independence and whatnot. And black folks are in the world are just seen as so passive, compliant, and whatnot. And but you know, I've been out in the world, and I do get an attitude from Arabs. You know, a lot of groups today is Arabs. I try not to mention them, but I, I have some angst because you know, when I'm in college, I'm going back to college this fall, and I've been around the Arabs, and you know, you sense a hesitancy, a resistance uh, from this people group. And today it just hits home how ignorant I am towards understanding how these groups, and these are Arabs coming into America from the Middle East, that region of the world where slavery is still practiced and common, stuff like that. And I'm interacting without being armed with the knowledge that these people I'm supposed to be fellowshipping with may just have slaves back home, black slaves. So when they're interacting with me, you know, an American descendant of slaves, is there much motivation to give respect, fellowship, stuff like that? When I go back to school, I'm going to be testing some of this new information I've gotten. Maybe I'll tell my story about how a roundabout way I had to become enslaved again to understand true emancipation and my position uh, in America and in the world. You know, and that's a journey. Oh, that's a journey. Took about 5, 6 years. Uh, Maybe we'll hit on that later on when we get to wrapping up this first year. Did I say first year? Implying another year? We'll see. But that's it today. The time is already up. Boy, this stuff, this half hour moves faster than an episode of Bill Cosby and Fat Albert. I grew up on that. Thanks for joining me for day 84. I'm Tom Lindsay, back. That's 365 days towards racial change. See you tomorrow.